All right. Hello. Welcome to another IncusOS live stream. Um, Still a bit of noise outside. You can probably still see the excavator behind me. So there's still that going on. I also have a meowing cat on the floor. It's the second time he comes to this building, so he's still trying to get used to it. He might also be hungry. Not really sure. Anyway, hope he might make a bit of an appearance by meowing his way through this live stream. Anyways, so we're gonna do kind of the usual thing. I'm gonna go through what happened over the past week in IncusOS, and then go through what I want to do with this particular live stream, which will be a bit different from the previous ones because it's less development and more kind of showing the state of things. All right. There's a request from Jared to see the cat. I don't know if he shows up on the floor. I don't think he's in the frame. Let's see. Kitty. Yeah. There we go. So yeah, he's over there by just like by the staircase. He was discovering how one of those spiral staircases work yesterday. He's used to straight staircases, and this one being like a pretty narrow metal spiral staircase. Took him a little while to figure it out, but he got it. Like at the end of my day yesterday, he was just on the upstairs side, so up there, judging me from above, as cats do. So. All right. Okay, let's take a quick look at what's going on within the past week of IncusOS. And then I'll take a look at kind of the state of things in general with a demo also including Operation Center. Alrighty, so past week we've been somewhat busy. Wednesday last week is October 3rd. October 3rd would be Friday, so we need to go slightly further. Yeah, getting some more meows here. Oh, he's about he's looking outside. Maybe you can see him there on the edge of the window. All right. So let's go a tiny bit further back. We want the second-ish. Yeah. So that's last week I did the remote syslog work. So that was that landing. And then from there on, we've got the changes that have been landing from that point on. So Matthias has been working on backup restore and factory reset for applications. So that's what landed, I think, on Friday here. We've got some more stuff coming related to that still, but yeah, basically adding backup, restore endpoints on the different applications. So that's been landing. We needed the migration manager application to also include the worker ISO that it needs as part of a migration. So we've added that as part of the image here, which got us into a few issues with ARM64 stuff later on. So we fixed that. I spent, when was that, Monday, I guess? Monday or Tuesday? Tuesday, looks like. Reworking the OS customizer. So I'll show you that in a tiny bit because we'll actually use it to download things. But effectively adding ARM64 support, adding support for Migration Manager, Operation Center as applications in there, doing some general cleanup, removing some of the scary warnings, because now we're effectively at a point where we do stable pushes of IncusOS. We've got both testing and stable channels. We do at least weekly pushes to stable. So it's some of the warnings are no longer warranted, so they've been removed, and some other warnings were put on specific applications. Also, it just ended up settling on my other desk here, so it's just chilling behind me. All right. A few more cleanups on network handling. We noticed issues with like the reported MAC address, and link speed was wrong occasionally when using bonds and bridges. So we fixed that logic to now be correct. It's picking up the speed of the bond and not of any of the virtual layers in between. So that's good. And then there's a bunch of cleanup around the API. Especially how we handle actions. So like, how do we request IncusOS to be stopped or restarted? factory reset or backed up or restored, those kind of features. We now have a standard way to do it in the API, so it's effectively using action name with a post. So we've just moved everything to that for consistency. That will make it much easier to then add a proper CLI for those commands in the near future. I'm getting a fair amount of noise here with the excavator having fun outside. Hopefully the microphone is doing a good job at not picking that too much, even if it's a bit distracting to me in the room anyways. All right. Bit more plumbing I did yesterday to better initialize Operation Center. So that's something I'm actually waiting for it to finish building. I'm keeping an eye in a different tab on that image building right now. Because I'd like to have that for the demo, but if it's gonna take too long, or just work around it like I did when I did a test run yesterday. It would be nice if it did make it. And we check the current state of those image builds. Yeah, it's still running. Let me check the slowest one. Oh, but they're uploading right now. Okay, so they're done building, they're just uploading. So at that point, I just need the image server to pick them up. Then I can flag them as being stable and we get to use them. So that's good. Checking that the Intel one is also done. It's weird, the ARM one is actually building faster than the Intel one. I'm not sure why, but anyway, that's ongoing. And just yeah, for anyone trying to follow that, you can see the stable builds here in the action section. What we do is whenever we want to publish a new image, we make a tag. The tag triggers a build that uses our GitHub action runners. So they're self-hosted. It's not running on GitHub Infra, it's running on ours. And it's building. So as I mentioned, ARM is currently uploading. So that's what we're seeing. It's about 1 gig uploaded. I think it's like 1.2 or 1.3 gigs to upload. The internet is super fast here, so that's not really the bottleneck. The bottleneck is mostly how fast the GitHub web server is at receiving the data. That's to be the bottleneck. But should be almost done. And then once that's uploaded and the Intel one is done too, then I can probably manually run because I don't want to really wait for the cron job to actually pull the image onto the public image server, do the signing of the index and all that stuff, then we get to use that image. Okay, so this one is uploaded, 1.45 gigs looks like, it's done. And on the Intel side, okay, it's almost done building the image. It's just doing the partition layout at the end, and then it needs to compress things and upload them. Installing Debian, so I guess it still needs to build some stuff. Okay. So yeah, anyway, it's gonna take a little while longer for everything to line up, then we can go and download the image. While this is ongoing, I can show you some of the changes to the image customizer. And actually, I lost the chat here. What's that open? Yeah. Okay. Let's go look at the image customizer. So IncusOS customizer. That's the current state of things here. So there's no more scary warning at the top. The requirements are pretty clear here. We've added, so like COM64 support is now added, so you can download those images. It does say 64-bit ARM servers because you do need your EFI Secure Boot and TPMs, which are not common on your run-of-the-mill Raspberry Pi or similar systems. So there's still a bit of a limitation there, and very few will actually be able to use those images, but they're available, they work. So that's good to have. Image usage, image type, that hasn't changed, that's still there. Image application, that's new. So now you get to pick Operation Center or Migration Manager as an option, like as an alternative to using Incus as the primary application of what you're deploying. And that's exactly what we'll do actually for the demo part when I'm going to be using Operation Center initially to kind of bootstrap things. Where's my, just keeping an eye on this thing, see as soon as it's done. Okay, image building looks like it's basically done. It's going to get to compression very soon. Yeah, just converting the image, done. Yeah. Okay. Alright, so that's repacking the image, and that's gonna go and do the compression of it, which takes a little while. All right. So we got the choice of application, and then we've been renaming some of the sections and the like so that it's not so Incus specific anymore in the downloader. It doesn't support every single feature that we could expose, but it does work pretty well to just get an ISO or a pre-installed image that you can then use and run. Oh, the cat just made it upstairs. So that's basically where we're at on this front. Now, okay, this one is doing, what's it doing actually? Trying to remember what that step is. Oh, that might be, is it generating a tarball before it compresses stuff? Is that what's going on? I actually remember that. I just wish it would go a bit faster. It would be nice if we had an image that we can use in the next few minutes. As I said, worst case, I can use yesterday's image. It's fine. I had to do a bit of manual patching on top of that. And I'd prefer to try and keep like just a clean experience where I don't need to go behind the scenes inside the image and fix things up, because in theory, what we want is for Operation Center and IncusOS to just generally be deployable on normal systems where you don't have that behind the scenes workaround to get in. So anyway, just checking something here. Just reminded me that I also need to build the CLI for Operation Center, which is probably a bit outdated on my machine. Okay, finally, so the image is now built, just compressing and uploading, and we'll be done. Okay, so that's the downloader. Now, what can we do while waiting? Let's go look at maybe the Incus, what's next with IncusOS. So looking at the other open issues and pull requests. I think I mentioned that last week already. We are working on packaging OpenFGA as like a supplementary application effectively. So you'd put that on top of Operation Center to provide a production OpenFGA deployment. Pretty often, wherever you need Operation Center is also where you're gonna need OpenFGA, so having the two cannot be combined and saving an extra VM that you need to manage and everything kind of makes sense. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're also wrapping up the OS-wide backup and restore. So we've landed OS-wide factory reset, we've landed factory reset of an application, and we've landed backup restore of an application. The piece that's missing now is the OS backup and restore. So that's backing up all of the OS settings and keys and all that kind of stuff, and then restoring that on the system. So that will take care of some of the disaster recovery cases, and also make it easier to port things from one machine to another. And on the open issue side, we're starting to have the set shrink, which is good. So that means we're getting closer and closer to trying to open the floodgates a bit more and having more people actively use IncusOS. So in here, we've got a bunch of things that are being worked on or are almost done. So OpenFG application, we just saw it. Backup restore, that's also ongoing. Which one is it? Consider recovery mechanism. That's effectively part of the backup restore. You can actually assign that to Matthias, just so we remember to close it at the same time as the rest. Cool. And then we've got API regression testing. That's just been open a few minutes ago. I've not actually looked at that, but that seems to be to add more tests to our API, which would be quite good to get. Few tweaks to the seeds for Operation Center Migration Manager that I'd like to see, so that's a tiny change to be made. This one, not sure it's really, it's a bug, it's a bit annoying, but also you're not supposed to use that to directly restart the system. You're supposed to use the restart API, which then doesn't have the issue. So I'm not sure we're gonna be really doing anything to try and fix that one. Enrolling with a provider, that's to handle the case where you deploy a system when you don't have Operation Center yet, and then you want it to be managed by Operation Center for updates and the like. So that effectively lets you enroll a machine with Operation Center after the fact. That should be a pretty easy change. We just need to add some more APIs to expose what we have currently as internal features. Version the application updates, that's to support having AB on application updates as well. So that should be pretty welcome. Will let us deal with some kind of failure cases where we don't currently have a super good answer. And then some documentation stuff. So getting Swagger API commands kind of throughout the code base to generate the Swagger API profile that we can then use to do like an easier way to go through the IncusOS API. So that's basically what we have open. The other one I kind of skipped over because that one is from yesterday and we still need to figure out the details. But I mentioned like if you're running on ARM, there's a decent chance you won't have a TPM. That will be a problem, even if you can get EFI, UEFI secure boot. So we've taken a look at what can we do for systems that physically cannot have a TPM module. So that's basically the idea is basically to start a software TPM instead, back it by something like a USB stick, and have that act as a de facto TPM. It still won't be as safe. It's not like the software TPM stack could be attacked, whereas a physical TPM is a bit harder to attack. But that will still provide a decent stopgap measure for some of those platforms. And that might let us run IncusOS on, say, Raspberry Pis running the EFI firmware on there. That's something we need to evaluate whether we can do it and also to what extent. Like one of the things we definitely want to do in that scenario is show a persistent warning that the system is not running kind of up to our normal security standards. And also expose that as a flag so that things like Operation Center might refuse enrolling such a system. Basically being like, no, like you need to actually have UEFI secure boot and physical TPMs. I'm not dealing with a machine that's using a software TPM. So that's something we're looking into to kind of relax a few things. But at the same time, we're also tightening down some others. Like we're currently having discussions around kernel builds and minimum CPU features and that kind of stuff. We're likely to start switching to a kernel in a few months that would require x86 64v3. So that would mean any system older than Intel Haswell or the first generation Zen cores from AMD would not boot. That's the kind of thing where like, if we do it, we're probably gonna get to shed some codes, limit attack surface, and maybe get 5-10% performance in some scenarios. That seems like a worthwhile trade-off, considering that Intel Haswell is, what, 13 years old or something like that? So it's a very old platform. We would not recommend anyone run IncusOS on anything that old anyways. So setting that kind of baseline would make sense, but we also want to make sure we don't break common use cases effectively. Anyway, just looking at the chat, we'll still be able to do anything with IncusOS without using Operation Center. Yeah, so absolutely. IncusOS does not depend on Operation Center. Operation Center is really just a way to manage, like build and manage several clusters. The goal is definitely for IncusOS to still work perfectly fine standalone. You don't need to use Operation Center. And we want to actually push more features into IncusOS proper in some scenarios so that you can also assemble home clusters and deploy a bunch of deploy the standard stack for authentication, authorization, monitoring, all that kind of stuff on top of just Incus with IncusOS without needing Operation Center. Operation Centers is really useful in enterprise environments where you need to manage dozens, if not hundreds of clusters. That's really where it shines at. You can use it at home with just a couple of clusters, that's perfectly fine. But it's really designed for larger scale operations. All right, let me check what's going on here. It's still compressing, that's taking forever. It's been compressing for 7 minutes. How long did it take on ARM, just to get a bit of an idea for what to expect here? Compression took 7 minutes, 41 seconds. Okay, so ARM took less time than where we're at with Intel. Great. I don't know what CPU I picked on this one. Like our CI stuff can run on one of two different servers here. One is a modern AMD EPYC, the other one is an older Intel server. So I'm not sure which one we ended up on. Okay, and I just checked. We landed on the older Intel, so that might be why it's a bit slow, maybe. The EPYC is usually a bit faster. Okay. Yeah, given we're almost already halfway through the live stream, and realistically publishing this is gonna take a little while, I'm just gonna do the workaround that I mentioned for that first piece, and hopefully the image becomes available partway through the demo, at which point I can at least refresh to get some of the newer UI and fixes stuff that we also have in this update. All right, so the first thing we need is going over here on the OS customizer, and we're gonna go and download an ISO for Intel installation for Operation Center, and then we need to provide a client certificate. So client certificate, that's easy enough. We just do Incus, and actually it shows that in the instruction, Incus remote get client certificate. That gives us the public half of the client cert. Put that in here, download. And we're downloading that ISO, at which point we can create a VM to run it in. And basically the main fix I was waiting for is around the public-facing HTTPS address for Operation Center. The one that's hard-coded in the version I'm downloading right now is not valid. So you need to either hit up the Operation Center API to fix it, or you need to go and mangle the config by hand behind the scenes. I'm actually just checking here. I thought that, oh yeah, I'm just making sure I've got the client binary for Operation Center also available on my system. I built it earlier, it's just not in my path. Oops. Okay, so now I'm gonna have it. It's downloaded, so we're good. Now let's go and create a VM. So I've got an empty project here for that stuff. Let's see if I still have the comments from yesterday. That'd be convenient. Yeah. So Operation Center, there we go. Empty VM, 50 gigs root disk, secure boot disabled. That's good. And then, like, it doesn't need much CPU or RAM, so we don't need to bump those. 1 gig of RAM, 1 CPU is gonna be fine. Just add a TPM to it, and then the install disk. That's the install disk, priority 10, so it boots from it. And then we can go and start this one. Oops, console VGA. Doesn't really matter anyway for the first boot, since it will just do the key enrollments. I can just do text console and then do VGA console after. Okay, and key enrollment is done, and then Operation Center VGA, and we'll see it go through install. Just gonna take a quick look to see where we're at with that compression stuff. Still compressing, lovely. And it's going through install here. And that's installed. Cat is watching me from above. All right, so we can go and stop it. So just stop Operation Center, then remove the install media and start it. Yeah, it's meowing from up there. Microphone is supposed to noise cancel, but I guess it's still trying to pick up the meows. All right. So starting up, generating the key. When you're running Operation Center on top of IncusOS, it's basically the exact same as when you're running Incus on there. The only difference is gonna be just in the running application. There we go. System is starting up, bringing up the network. Half the time network kind of glitches. No, okay, got it. I'll just see downloading application, Operation Center, initializing, system is ready. So that's up and running. And we'll be able to actually go and access that. So let's look for an IP address. I can do over IPv4 here, that'd be fine. So if I go in my web browser and I use that IP address, 8443, it comes up with a self-signed certificate, so that's fine. And then, so I gave it my client certificate at the time of downloading the image. And my web browser has that same client certificate imported in the web browser. So same thing as if you're using something like the Incus UI. So you can expose that, and at which point, hey, there you go, you're logged in. We also support OpenID Connect. That's really the nicer, smoother workflow to use in any environment that has it. But otherwise, it works the same way as the Incus UI with TLS. So that's Operation Center. If we go look, there's a bunch of updates that must be downloading right now. Also, the newer version of the UI would have actually given us the status of those different updates, but yeah, we don't have that yet. Let me see if it's still compressing. It is. And the other thing I'd like to do here, actually, if we click on it, do we get to see the status? No, still not. Okay. For more details, we'll want the CLI, which normally would look like this. So Operation Setup, provisioning, update list. That will fail because we don't have it configured to go over the network. So Operation Center, and I need to figure out what the config looks like. I kind of forgot. Let me check on another machine. We actually have an open issue on both Operation Center and Migration Manager to add a remote mechanism similar to the one in Incus to take care of that. So anyway, Operations Center server. I'm gonna have some problem with it being self-signed, I think. I don't remember how that stuff works with the CLI when it's self-signed. So if I do that, then it's gonna complain. No, okay, so it did hit it, but presumably not authenticated. So if I do something that requires authentication, yeah, that fails. I might be able to copy my client certificate because I'm using the one from my Incus system usually in there. Maybe if I just copy that over, then I'll have a valid. Oops. No, still forbidden. Okay. Great. How does that stuff work again? Yeah, no idea. It's reading config YAML, but it's not reading anything else. Okay, it's the first time I use the CLI with the TLS backend, so that's a bit confusing. Let me just check. It might be in the YAML itself that we need to put the key. That would potentially make sense. Again, having a remote mechanism like in Incus in there, that's gonna take care of that. Let me just look on the side in the code. Okay, CLI config, TLS client start file, client key file. Okay, so there's config keys to tell it where to get the client certificate and key. So I can remove those. Then do TLS client cert file, TLS client key file, and then pass the path to the Incus one. Again, we're working on something better because that is not particularly smooth. Yay, okay, now I'm authenticated. So, if we look here, this one is ready, the other ones are pending. I don't know why. I had that same issue yesterday where like some of the updates just kind of got stuck, which is not exactly great. There's a way to force that. If you do cleanup, then they will go away. And if you do refresh, then they start downloading again. It might be like a race condition or some issue with the network or something. So that should be downloading the files. Again, like we can go see behind the scenes because we are running on Incus, so we can go look at the operation center updates. We can see the files kind of making their way in. So one of the update looks downloaded and it's getting another one now. And we can see this one is now marked as being ready and it's fetching the others. So that's good. Again, let's see where we're at here. Yay, we're actually uploading stuff now. Oh crap, the operation was cancelled, so we ran out of time during the build. Okay, well, so much for having that ready during the live stream. There's just no way now that this is gonna be available in time. So we're just gonna have to deal with this one. Fine. So, update list. Okay, there we go. So all 3 images are ready now. And if we go, I think it's in system, network, edit. Yeah, so here that's the issue. The address here is not valid. We need to actually give it the IP address of the server, which is this guy. I'm gonna use IPv6 today. And that logic effectively has been changed. So it happens automatically starting with the image I'm publishing later today. So now that's in place. Now that we have that and we've got images, if we just go back even in the UI here. Okay, so the 3 images are here. And then I'd like to get the new UI because the new UI kind of fixes a few glitches. And I've had Piotr on our side spend a bunch of time this morning making it look nice and fixing a bunch of stuff for me. And I'm kind of annoyed to not have that to show you folks. So I'm just gonna do a quick hack here of going directly in what was merged this morning, downloading the latest version of the UI and just sideloading that onto my operation center. So I can show you the newer version of that. The code itself hasn't been changed, so we don't need to deal with the daemon. It's really just the UI that we want a newer version of. Okay, oops. I don't know if I've got unzipped. Oh, do I have unzip? I do not have unzip. Okay, so let's do that here instead. Unzip UI, and then Incus file. Go in there, create the UI folder, and then push the index and the assets to operation center root UI. There we go. Let's see what that looks like. Looks good. And then we can bind map that on top of the UI folder. And if we go here and we do updates and force refresh, yay, we've got the newer version that does show the status, has refresh and cleanup at the top now. So that's all good. And if I go on the server side, we've got nothing. So the way it works with Operation Center is you need to create a token. So that's effectively a join, like a join token type thing where new servers can use that to register themselves. So we're gonna issue a token. Description is demo, it's valid for a month by default, that's fine. Allow it to be used 10 times. And here we go, now we've got a token. Now within a token, we can either, you can modify it to the configuration, or you can go and create seeds. So effectively presetting what you want for the install seed, network seed, application seed for IncusOS. And then that will, if you mark it as public, that will give you a public URL that you can then instruct a server's BMC to directly pull and boot from. That saves you from having to actually download it and attach it or like write it to a media or anything. it lets you directly boot a server from it. That's very convenient. In our case, we don't really need that. So we can use the simpler solution of doing the token and then just hitting the download button here, which then gives us a form very similar to what we dealt with online. Actually, this one is wrong. It should be we shouldn't allow multiple selections because they can't be co-installed. Just a tiny glitch I'm gonna make a note of. Operations and UI should only allow one application to be selected. Okay. So we want an ISO for x86, wiping the target drive, and what we want is to deploy Incus servers. So we select Incus. Network config, not really needed. They're gonna be single network interface today, so we don't need that. Can do download, and we'll see it's preparing the ISO for us, streaming it to the web browser, and then it will download on disk. So that just takes a few seconds. Actually, while that's going on, what we can do is go and create the VMs for those servers. So today I'm gonna go with three servers will be enough. So we can do create server 1, server 2, and server 3. They're all 50 gigs of disk, but this time they've got a bit more CPU and memory than last time. So 4 CPUs, 4 gigs of RAM. And once we have those in place, then we do device add to add a TPM to those guys. So 1 TPM, 2 TPM, 3 TPM, everyone gets a TPM. And then we need to attach the install disk. So that's what we're waiting for at this point. Did it actually download it? Yeah, it did. So home, download, and it should be the name of the token. So the token is 1A something, so that's the ISO. So we're gonna put that on server 2 and server 3. And then we can start them all. So they all do the same dance. We can watch server 1. Should do the enrollment. There we go. Then it reboots and it's gonna do the install. Yeah, there was a question about whether Operation Center is also open source. Yeah, it is. So all 3 applications, so Incus itself, Operation Center, and Migration Manager are all open source. Operation Center and Migration Managers are developed by Feature Fusion, so they're under a different org on GitHub. But yeah, they're all open source. They're all Apache 2 licensed. So nothing too special there. Now we're going through the install. There we go. Install is done. And I suspect it should be done on all 3. We're still gonna check. Yep, done on all 3. So now I can stop them all. Oops, server 01, server 00, server 03. There we go. And then can remove from server 1 the install media, server 2 same thing, server 3 same thing. And we can start them all back. There we go. And we can look at what that looks like. So their first boot post install. And it's going to be a tiny bit different from what you normally see with IncusOS on first boot, but just a tiny bit. So we can see IncusOS is starting, it's fine. There's a question around whether we're using the Ubuntu vanilla framework for the UI. I don't believe we are on Operation Center and Migration Manager. It does look kind of similar to the Incus UI, which does, I think, still use vanilla. Let's see. Can we actually easily tell? It's always such a mess with the JavaScript stuff. Actually, I can just go check the code. That's going to be easier. So if we go in Operation Center, let's see, do we have any mention of vanilla? We don't. Whereas I'm pretty sure if we look at the Incus UI, that one still has vanilla in it. Yeah, it imports vanilla framework in a bunch of places. So basically the Incus UI is just a thin set of modifications on top of the LXD UI, so we don't want to start messing with the different frameworks and whatnot. Whereas the UI for Operation Center and Migration Manager, it's still kind of the same, elements and general look and feel, but it was a clean new code base, so we didn't have any needs to use Canonical's vanilla framework, and we could just use just kind of the standard components. Okay, so there we go. That machine booted. We got a small NTP issue, it looks like, but doesn't really matter. Then it downloaded Incus, initialized it, and we can see on the one before last line, server registered with the provider. So that's the piece that's kind of different from what you normally see. And what that means is if we go in Operation Center and we do servers, now we've got 3 servers that appeared here. So they self-registered. Now they've got pretty annoying names. We can go rename them if we can figure out which is which. So if we take one of the servers, this is server 01, and we can see at the top left corner, it's got its host name, so F6B. So if we look at F6B here, we can go now and rename that to server 01. Rename. Okay, good. Let's figure out server 02. Server 02 is F96. So the name that we see here is effectively the machine UUID from its firmware. So we could line that up with Incus, the Incus VM directly, but we can also just look on screen. So I'm just going to rename them to the actual name. We also would have the opportunity to go and change the network config directly here if we needed to. We don't really need to in this case, so we'll just leave that alone. But effectively, we got that in place now. So server 1, 2, and 3. And at that point, we're basically ready to create a cluster. There's currently a missing piece of UI that we're working on to actually let you create the cluster from the UI. So instead, we're going to have to do it from the CLI, and then we can see how it shows up back over in the UI. So for that, we're going to need, so if I use the CLI, Operation Center, provisioning, we do server list, we see them here, cluster list, there's nothing. The command we want is cluster and then give it a name, then give it a URL that it will be reachable at. If you've got a reverse proxy or a round robin DNS record or something or not, that's what you want to put. In this case, I'm just going to put the IP address of the first server. That's not exactly recommended, but it will work. And then you need to pass the name of the servers you want to include, so server 1, server 2, and server 3. Now, this would work with the caveat that the cluster would not have any trusted certificate. So you would deploy a cluster, but then nobody could actually log into it. So to address that, you can pass additional configs to configure things like IncusOS services. So that's what you would use if you need to set up iSCSI, NVMe, LVM, those kind of things. But you can also pass an application seed, which is what we're going to use here. So we'll have a cluster.yaml, and that application seed is effectively the same as an Incus pre-seed. So we can do certificates, and then in certificates we can do name, my machine, type, client, certificate, and then the actual content of the cert. Get certificate, yeah, this guy. So I should be able to put that in there. I fixed the formatting a bit. Oops, that. Trying not to screw up the syntax of that, otherwise we're gonna have a bad time when actually provisioning it. I'm not sure why that didn't work now. Okay, here we go. There's one more space than I would like. No. Okay, so that should be fine. So it's the only thing we're putting in the config for this demo is just certificates, new client called the Cara type client, and the certificate to trust. So we're gonna pass that and pass it here as cluster.yaml. And let's try that. So that should take a few seconds. And effectively, Operation Center does a few things, and it's done. It creates, so it bootstraps the cluster on the first server. It generates the join tokens and like to join the other servers in. And then once the servers are joined in, it actually generates and runs Terraform to apply any additional config. So the storage pools, networks, projects, profiles, all that stuff is done through Terraform. Now, if we go look at the UI, refresh, see, we can say cluster one, the connection address. In theory, that should work. So I should be able to go on there, accept the connection. My certificate is being asked for, so that's good. Login with TLS, that's not good though. So it's like it didn't actually add my certificate. Again, we can cheat because we're running on top of Incus, so that's convenient. Let's go see what it did. Okay, so it only, that's Operation Center, so it only has that certificate. It did not add mine. Gonna have to figure out why. It's the first time I tried to add it that way, so I'm not too surprised that something might be wrong. It's still a bit annoying. Anyway, I'm gonna manually go and add my certificate the way it should have been added. And then we'll go check what happens. So, okay, so now it's added the way it should have been. And if I go in the UI, now I'm trusted and we're good. Okay. So we can see it's a cluster of 3 servers. If we go look, storage, it just did local storage on all 3 servers. So we can see 16 gigs available per server. Some storage volumes were automatically created. So if we go look at that, each server has a backups and an images volume. And each server would have gotten configured to use that as well. So if we go look at, that's the project config. If we go look at the server config, we should see, what's the storage stuff? Come on. Are we missing the storage stuff in the UI? Really? Looks like we are. Was it in MISC? Yeah, it's in MISC. Okay. Oh, there we go. That's it here. Storage probably had to have its own section, honestly. But okay. So it did set that in here. And there's a question about whether we're using ZFS. Yeah, we are. So the storage pools, all the local storage pools are ZFS. If you create additional pools on IncusOS, they will also be ZFS. Everything is ZFS and with encryption. And the encryption is then chained back to the TPM. You can still create other things, but that's typically going to be on external drives. Like, for example, clustered LVM is a thing we support, Ceph is a thing we support as part of IncusOS. We strongly recommend people don't really do anything other than ZFS as far as local storage. I think technically BurFS and LVM can be used, but we'd rather you create your storage through IncusOS, which then means using ZFS. So we have the ability to actually handle encryption keys and backup and restore and all that kind of stuff correctly. On the networking side, what happened is we've got an Incus BR0 bridge, and we've got a mesh BR0 mesh network. So effectively it's a VXLAN multicast network within the cluster, which is used for the internal project. So if we look, we've got a default and an internal project that were created. And the internal project, I think if we look at its profile, we should see that it lands, it lands everything on mesh BR0. So that's how that works with, actually there's a tiny bug here. It should have a name key. Terraform should set name property on th0. Okay, just taking a quick note of that one. Storage is on local, that's fine. So that's all good. And I mean, we can try it. So if we do, oops, close has no operator, not sure what that means, but okay. Instances, there we go, create an instance. So test, we'll do test container and a test VM, I guess. So test container, let's do Debian, Trixie, default, and go. and create instance, test VM, again, Debian Trixie default, and we want a VM. Go. All right. I can see it boot up. And then soon after, we'll get a terminal. Should be functional soon. Yep, here we go. Okay, so that's container VMs both running on top of that, that cluster. Now, what will happen, and it probably hasn't happened yet, is Operation Center also keeps track of global inventory. So you might have, you know, potentially, like for some of our customers, like hundreds of clusters. And the Operation Center will effectively, in the background, connect and keep track of everything running on each of those. I said, like, it's not done it yet. I think in the current version of the code, it does it once per hour. So it just hasn't gotten to that yet. We are going to be adding logic to use the Events API to do live updates of the inventory. So we don't need to wait until the next resync. But anyways, actually don't know if there's a CLI to force a resync. Let me check. Maybe there is. Operation Center, provisioning, cluster. Yep, cluster resync. Okay, so we can force one. So we do cluster resync, cluster one. Now, here we go. Now the global inventory has been updated. So now we can show that on cluster one, on server one, in the default project, we've got a container called test container. And the link here effectively gets you into the Incus UI for the correct cluster directly on the right page to show you what it is. Same thing for anything else. If we do networks, we should see how to networks. ACLs, forwards, all that kind of stuff, there's none currently, so we don't see them. On the storage side, we can look at pools, we can look at all of the volumes, so we can see our images, we can see our instances. There should be a column to tell us what the type of the volume is, and there isn't. So let me add that. Add column in storage volume view for volume type. Okay. Same thing for profiles and same thing for projects. So that makes it kind of easy to deal with stuff across many clusters by just having the global inventory. There's a question being like, is Operation Center like MAS? Not really. So Operation Center currently cannot deploy a server from scratch. The way it works is it's closer to like a unified controller type thing, if you're familiar with that. Basically, you would deploy you deploy your server, and the ISO image it's booting from contains the URL of the Operation Center server, as well as a token it can use to register. And then once it registers, the public keys of both servers are kept, and that's what's used for authentication from that point on. We are looking at getting slightly closer to MAS in that for some server manufacturers, mostly Dell and HP, that have very solid Redfish REST APIs, we are now looking at a way to go on the servers tab here and do add. And then you would enter the IP address of the server's BMC, as well as the admin login and password for the server's BMC, at which point Operation Center can talk to that API to tell it, hey, reconfigure the BIOS to trust our certificate, reconfigure the BIOS to enable a TPM, reconfigure the BIOS to boot from virtual media, and then configure virtual media backed by this ISO and boot the server. And then the server will effectively boot itself, install automatically, show up in the list. That will then be a bit closer to MAS, but we're not doing all of the other weirder aspects of MAS, where like it takes over DHCP, it takes over TFTP, it takes over all that kind of stuff. That's not something we're really interested in. We're interested in easily getting a bunch of identical servers registered with us, so we can then cluster them together and manage them from that point on. There's a question around if IncusOS will work on first generation AMD EPYCs. Yep, there's no problem with AMD EPYC Naples because those are first gens and one cores, so they will be compatible even once we start restricting to the newer version of the x86 architecture. So that's not a problem. I don't commonly use Naples servers here. I mostly have second gen, so I've got second and third gen. So I've got Rome and what's third gen again? EPYC third gen. I don't remember what city it is. Because Naples is V1, Rome is V2. There we go. Milan is V3. There we go. So yeah, I've got a bunch of Rome and Milan servers here. I don't have Naples, but yeah, it's still first gen Zen, so that will be fine. And from what I remember, x86 64 v3, which is what we want to put as the baseline, even includes a bit of pre-Zen stuff. It includes some AMD Bulldozer, technically, I think. So yeah, v3. So v3 for Intel, as I mentioned earlier, it starts with Haswell, but AMD, it's not Bulldozer, it's Excavator. So it supports some of those, which are generation even prior to Zen starting. And then Zen is what's used by the first gen EPYCs. So yeah, no issue with Naples. All right, so yeah, we got the cluster, it's in the inventory. Now, the last thing I kind of wanted to show in this live stream is the Terraform piece, because that's what most likely went wrong with the certificate config, so I wanted to look into it. You've got two options here. One on a cluster is to replace the certificate. That's used if you want to push a valid certificate. You should do it through Option Center so it can learn the new valid certificate as you're pushing it. Otherwise, it won't be able to authenticate anymore. And the other option that was added this morning is to download the Terraform config. So we can go look at that and see what it did. So that's the config that was generated. Let me just do it from the CLI instead. So download, and then cluster 1 Terraform config, and look at the files in there. So the first one is just some variables, I think. Yeah, not very important for this. Then the providers, so it picks our own provider for Incus, and then some specific bits from HashiCorp. There's the definition of the remote here, so it uses cluster 1, how to access it with what IP address port, so good. And then the resources, so networks, that's how it created the mesh network and Incus BR0, so that's fine. Profiles, that's where I need to do a tiny tweak in this one, because there's a missing property that needs to be added, so we have to deal with that, same thing here. That's for the profiles. Then we have projects. There's no special config or anything. Server is here. Storage pools. I'm wondering if we're just missing the logic to actually set up the certificates. That seems like it could be the issue, actually. Because that looks fine for storage and then volumes. But yeah, basically I passed it the config, like the certificates keys, and it didn't do anything with it. So I suspect we might be missing the plumbing for the certificates. That would be pretty easy to add. I'm gonna make another note to fix that. Operations center missing certificate handling through Terraform. Okay, so yeah, the reason why we're using Terraform in that way is because of how we want Operations Center to be used. We don't want Operations Center to become your new VMware vCenter, where it has direct write access to everything. We see that as a very bad security design. We want Operations Center to be a global overview, but not have the ability to make write changes after something has been deployed. So the way it's supposed to work is you have those servers over here, and then you create a cluster. And once the cluster is created, Operations Center downgrades its own access to the cluster from being full admin to just being read-only, except for update management of the servers. And at that point, if the user wants to do more changes, they shouldn't be done through Operations Center. They should either be done directly on the objects using, the Incus CLI or the Incus UI, or if there are cluster-wide changes like new storage pools, new networks, server configs, that kind of stuff, that should be done through Terraform, or done by hand, but Terraform is kind of a recommendation because we're trying to push for infra as code as much as possible. So the ability to download the Terraform data once the cluster is deployed gives you a starting point for your infra as code tree for the lifetime of that cluster. So you can effectively take that data that we used, because it's not just, we don't just give you the files, we also give the Terraform state in there. So that's effectively the current state of that cluster. You can put that into a GitOps process, and from that point on, all of the changes that you're doing on top of that cluster go through that pipeline. So that's the general idea, and that's kind of how we handle security in general. Like, we're really trying to make it so no cluster can compromise the cluster next to it, and Operations Center cannot compromise all the clusters. So really trying to keep things nicely isolated to just avoid potential issues down the line if some security issues are found in specific components. Anyways, that's basically your look at Operations Center deploying an Incus cluster. It worked reasonably well. I think I've got a few notes for some bugs to go through. I'm planning a more in-depth video that won't be a live stream. It will be an actual recorded video to go over Operations Center deploying a cluster with some more details, and then also deploying Migration Manager on top of it. That's the other thing you can get. Still have a few minutes. I guess I can show that real quick. But if you go back to your tokens here, if I just clean up my downloads folder, got a bunch of stuff in there by now. If I just clean that up, and I download, and this time I say I want Migration Manager, and download. That will let us deploy a server which will not run Incus, but will run Migration Manager, which, again, once we actually configure that with the right keys to be able to connect to it, we'll be able to connect to a VMware machine and to Incus and start moving some stuff. Currently, Migration Manager is really focused on VMware, but the design is flexible enough that we could also add OpenStack, Proxmox, and others as like a migration source to Migration Manager. But currently, it's primarily VMware, whether it's vCenter or ESXi, to Incus. So we've got the ISO. I can just show you so if I do create, let's do Migration Manager, and same story. So you add a TPM to it, and then uninstall media. It's still the same token, so the file name should be the same. It's just the content is slightly different, actually. Start that, give it a little while to do the enrollment, and then it will boot back. And actually go through the install. The thing here, we do have the issue that there is currently, that it is going to deploy Migration Manager, but doesn't know how to add my trusted certificate to it. There might have been a way to provide a seed when I generated the ISO. I just didn't think of it at that point. So we're gonna once again end up with an environment where Migration Manager will not let us talk to it until we enroll the key manually. But anyways, we can still do the rest. So device, remove Migration Manager, install, and then we can start this guy. So it's gonna do its first boot, and then it's gonna register with Operations Center. Actually reminds me, there's a couple of things I didn't show with the server view that might be useful too. I'll show you that. So anyway, okay, bring up network. Cat is meowing. I think he's coming back down the staircase slowly. Okay, so it's downloading Migration Manager for us, and then we'll initialize it. There we go, up and running. Okay, cool. So with that, as mentioned, it's not gonna trust me, so I need to actually go and mess with it manually. Migration Manager, system, network security. It's under security, edit. Oh, there's no text editor, right? That's gonna be fun. Because we see a trusted client certificate here, but that's the one for Migration Manager, for Operation Center. I need to add mine to the list. I don't remember if we have a command to show just the fingerprint. Can't type today. No, it shows me the certificate, but not the fingerprint. Okay, so that's always fun. X509, fingerprint, SHA-256, what? Something like that, I think. I never remember exactly the syntax. I need to do in. Oh, I got it surprisingly right. Okay. So let's do that, and then Incus file edit. Again, that's quite the workaround. I'm gonna need to sort that out cleanly. But I can go in here and add this guy. And just need to remove all of the semicolons here. Okay. And if I restart Migration Manager, then it's gonna come back up and actually trust me. Now, if we go in Operation Center here, we can see Migration Manager is here. I can rename that. There we go. And it actually shows the type as Migration Manager instead of Incus, so it detected that just fine. It is not clustered, obviously. And what I didn't show earlier with servers is we've got some extra data, so we can go look at all of the hardware data. So that's basically equivalent of the resources API in Incus. So we've got all of the hardware details reported to Operation Center and kept track of this way. And we can go look at the system data as well, which includes its current network config and the security keys. So we can get effectively the recovery keys through Operation Center if we need to recover any systems. So instead of having to manually track the recovery keys across potentially thousands of servers, you effectively have Operation Center doing that here. And now let's see, Migration Manager should let me log in. Yep. And here we go, we're in Migration Manager. I don't have a VMware environment to show you migration from, but I can probably add the cluster at least as a target just to show how it works. So if we go into migration targets, create target, cluster 01, it's Incus, it's gonna be TLS. That's the endpoint. We need to give it a client certificate and key that's valid. Can generate a new one for that, or I could steal the one from Operation Center. Let's do that. It's gonna be easiest for the demo. That also avoids me showing my actual private key on screen, because this one I don't care about. And again, like in normal environments for us, we always deploy with OIDC, so we don't do that. Instead, we just get the online authentication flow. So submit, confirm the certificate. Okay, target was created. Okay, and we can see, yeah, connection okay, TLS, the cluster is there. There's no source, so nothing we can really do that's particularly useful, but that's also effectively how to deploy Migration Manager on top of Operation Center. And with the work we're doing with allowing changing of the provider on an existing system that would actually let us enroll Operation Center with Operation Center. It's a bit of a weird one, but if Operation Center was in the server list, then all of its updates would also go through itself, allowing for like proper update control across everything and not everything minus Operation Center itself. So that's basically where we're at. Also, got a list of kind of small issues and whatnot to look at going into next week. And then I'm planning on recording a more in-depth video for the Future Fusion guys, mostly on Friday, which will most likely also end up publishing on my YouTube channel to show the whole stack working, including migrations, including all of that stuff. All right, hopefully this was useful. As mentioned earlier, like Operation Center, Migration Manager are obviously not required components for someone using IncusOS. IncusOS with just Incus works great on its own. That's what we do for the demo server. That's what I do for a bunch of my servers. But all three working together is really what it's really what unblocks deploying this at very large scales and doing complex migrations from VMware environments over to Incus and tracking of VMs and the like across quite a lot of systems. Alrighty, so hopefully this was quite a useful overview. That image is still building. I'm hoping it actually makes it through this time. Still quite a few other things for us to work on IncusOS and then on the related projects. But yeah, hopefully that gets you a bit more of the vision of why we've been working on those different projects and how they kind of fit together. That's effectively what we've been working towards. There's a bunch more things we want to do to improve the user experience in general. Like having to mess around with TLS certificates is not ideal. We'd like there to be an easy way to kind of have OpenID Connect working right from the get-go, and then be something you can then switch to your own with more flexibility. So that's something we're looking into to just make the whole thing even smoother. But in general, the thing does work. We can use TLS certificates, that's fine. There are a couple of things here that I was not happy with that I had to work around by going directly on the machines. That's gonna get fixed over the next few days, because when you actually deploy this stuff in production, you're not likely to be deploying everything on top of Incus VMs. You'll be deploying on real machines, and real machines are gonna be locked down. You won't get to go and poke behind the scenes like I did. So all of that needs to be cleanly moved to APIs, cleanly moved to having good ways to manage all of that stuff. But it's all working. And we've also had a few extra fun issues over the past few months that really made us test all of our rescue logic, and it works perfectly fine now. So we've got the ability to manually push an update directly on the machine by booting from a USB stick with a correctly signed update. We've got the ability to run a hotfix, and all that stuff works correctly now. So that's pretty good. And yeah, Jared is mentioning like supporting the Acme/Let's Encrypt protocol would be quite interesting for this stuff. And it is. There's a few interesting edge cases. So if we turn it on for Incus, then Operation Center will get out of sync with what the expected certificate is. So we need to have a bit more logic in Operation Center to handle the fact that the cluster might have a valid certificate, and if it does, to not be nitpicky about exactly what it is. If it's valid, it's valid. So there's that kind of handling we need to do. And then for Migration Manager and Operation Center itself, we might also add Acme/Let's Encrypt support directly there. That might be an option. The other option is to have Operation Center act as the kind of distribution point for TLS certificates. So maybe it will be able to go and in some cases, like DNS challenge type stuff, do the validation itself with Let's Encrypt to get the certificates and then distribute them to Operation Center servers, Migration Manager servers, Incus servers. But it might also, and that's what's kind of more relevant to us in the enterprise business corporate world. It can integrate with things like Microsoft Active Directory Certificate Authority, or I guess they probably renamed it to Entra something these days. But effectively, those kind of corporate certificate authorities. So we can integrate with that, get certificates from those, and then distribute those certificates to the servers. One thing I really am hoping to change with our solution is the security posture that we're seeing at customers, which has not been great. Like the number of environments that run on self-signed certificates with normal user credentials that are kind of the same everywhere, even in large business environments, is kind of maddening. So we're really trying to make it difficult for people to do that and really pushing for, hey, you need proper DNS records, you need proper TLS certificates. We're gonna help you make those happen. We're gonna help you keep track of the validity of all that stuff and nudging you so that things keep going. But just trying to kind of do the right thing. Same thing for kind of the endpoints. We want to recommend folks using proper load balancers in front of our APIs, so that if a server dies and that's the one that was used as the main DNS record or something, you don't suddenly lose access to the entire cluster because of one server. You should be using load balancers for that, and we'll make it easy by providing ideally some example configs, but at least the list of all the endpoints, and making it easy to get that from the Terraform data we provide, so that in the same pipeline they can also configure their DNS provider, their load balancer provider, all of that stuff nicely and automatically. All right, so that's basically where we're at. I've got a pretty meowy cat next to me back there. Let's see if I can just show him. He's, I think, hiding in the corner of the desk at the back. Somewhere here. Yeah, there we go, there's a cat. So he's meowing a bunch. And yeah, hopefully this was a useful video for everyone here. Next week, I think we're gonna get back to more normal development, whether it's on IncusOS or on Incus itself. So next week's live stream will be a bit more traditional in that regard. But do expect a longer form kind of video that goes through a bit of the higher level view of what we're doing with Feature Fusion and the stack, and then demo including doing VM migration, all that kind of stuff to kind of show the whole story. All right, thanks everyone very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.